All right, what's going on, NavalX community? Today I have a fantastic episode. I'm going to take you down a journey of someone who is a first generation American. He was a golf caddy, became a naval officer, became a naval supply officer, created a household name in additive manufacturing across the Navy, became an instructor to naval officers all over the world from multiple countries, and finished out his tour of 30 years with NavalX, kind of corralling us a bunch of crazies and change agents, doing some things around innovation. Captain Frank Futcher, how's it going?
Hey, Matt. It's going great. Thank you for having me on today. I enjoy these Connecx podcasts.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully, when you get out, you keep listening. Stay an
Yes,
avid subscriber.
yes, I'm
I
going to be following NavalX. I can guarantee you that, Matt.
mean, for you and me, it's just like a conversation. We do this like all the time.
We do. We are on Teams a lot or some other virtual platform, which is great. But I'd rather be there with you. I think is a better way of doing some of this sometimes.
Oh, definitely. Well, and the energy that's one of the hardest things about the pandemic and such is everyone telework. The energy is not quite the same as it is around in person.
But you find a way to bring it live, so that's good.
My crazy communicates over screen, so it's all good.
Yeah.
So we're going to take you down a journey with Frank today. That he's been a 30-year Navy captain, or will be 30 years in May. That's quite the career. How did that start? Was there a 8-year-old Frank like I'm going to be in the Navy one day? Take us down
It
your
was.
journey.
Uh, a little bit of yes and no. I mean, the journey I think kind of started because my parents. I'm a first generation American. In fact, I was the first one in my family born in the United States. So my parents had moved from Europe, from England, in the late '60s, and then I was born shortly thereafter, just outside of New York City. But my dad had served in the British Merchant Marine, including in World War II. He was on a landing ship that was actually delivering troops ashore on D-Day in 1944.
Mm.
So I had this connection just with the sort of the maritime service and the other pieces. For whatever reason, growing up, because of that, I was really interested in World War II history. And then just over time, my parents moving to this country just really didn't have any money. So my dad came home one day in high school. I was a decent student, and he actually had an ROTC application. So filled it out. We went through this process. I started learning about the Navy, and it was actually not just the Navy application. It was here's a whole set. It was Army, it was Air Force, it was Navy. So I filled it out, and next thing I know, I received a scholarship for an ROTC scholarship, and sort of literally head off on that journey, really knowing little except history of the Navy, because that was an interest area. So uh, I didn't really know what I was getting into, and my initial thought was, oh wow, this is a great way to pay for college. And
Yeah.
then, strangely, after my first year in ROTC, every summer when you're on a full scholarship, they send you essentially on like what they call a training cruise. You get assigned to a ship. So the ship I was assigned to was an LSD, a landing ship dock, the Portland, which also carries Marines, which happened to be then, of all places, on a cruise or on a deployment, and it was in Northern Europe. So I had to literally fly back to my parents' home country, England, and then fly up to Scotland and join the ship there. So my initial experience created this weird connection back with where my parents were from. So to be honest, I had no real plan except to find a way to pay for college and try to learn something. And now, almost 35 years later, here I am.
Wow, that's quite the way to just, hey, let's get some college money, and you're paying off that college 35 years later.
Exactly. Yes.
So, when you started and you joined, you started as an officer, correct?
Right. So I was commissioned as an officer through ROTC, and so through those training cruises in the summer, you get to experience, like, I get to spend time as a Marine, playing Marine, assaulting a beach, which was fun. I got to fly, literally be in as a co-pilot. on a Hawkeye, on an E2C, which was great. Spent
Okay.
time with the SEAL. So anyway, you have all these experiences, but when I came down to opportunity to make the decision, I was a business major, and on one of the ships I was on, I spent time with a supply officer, which is he was running the inventories, had the budgets, he was paying the crew, and anyway, I made the connection through that, and I actually requested to be a supply officer, and so that's what I am. I am a supply officer, a logistician of the Navy. So I thought, I'm going to take my business experience and kind of apply that in the Navy, and that's something like a skill that then I could learn to use. And so my initial plan, again, I started with no plan, and then I'm like, oh, you know what, I'm going to gain this 4 or 5 years of experience. Then I'm going to leave the Navy. I'm going to get an MBA, and then I'm going to go work for some big company. And then I had a good CO who said, hey, why don't you just try one more tour? Why don't you just try this? Stay in the Navy. And I said, okay. And somehow the Navy kept convincing me to do one more tour. So uh, that's how I got to, I come in and be a supply officer.
Okay. Very interesting. So walk us through your tours. Where did you serve? What ships did you serve on? What countries? What was your experience?
Yeah, I mean it's been a great journey. I've served on four different ships, two logistic ships, which makes sense as a supply officer, logistician. And then, believe it or not, I was a department head on an LSD, but a newer class of landing ship dock. So got to carry Marines, deploy with Marines for two
Hoorah.
years as a department head, which is a lot of fun. Really learned about the Marine Corps through that tour. And then I had an interesting tour, which was not planned, but something happened to the supply officer on the USNS Comfort, which is a hospital ship.
Mhm.
And I was planning the supply chain support for the Comfort, which was going on what's called essentially like a presidential deployment. These hospital ships would deploy on a humanitarian mission, and this one was to Central and South America. So something happened to the supply officer, and I got the call that said, "Hey, we really, the mission. Uh, you're more at that point. I was a commander. They're like,
Mhm.
hey, can you go do this?" And I got the call, and they said, "Can you report?" It was a Friday. I was literally having margaritas on the pool deck with neighbors, and I get this call, and they said, "Can you report to the ship early next week?" I said, "Okay." I literally had to go into the attic that weekend, pull out coveralls, pull out what they call working khakis, the ship khakis that are cotton, and start to prepare to walk on the ship. And then I walked on, and then 2 weeks later we deployed. So four ships, and then over time it was, believe it or not, it's been 60 countries,
Wow.
everything, all Central America, both coasts of South America, both coasts of Africa, Asia, like from Singapore and Thailand and Japan and the Philippines to different parts, obviously the Mediterranean and the Middle East. So 60 countries. The few continents that I just have not been on yet are just Australia. I just hadn't had a chance to get to Australia, and
Uh-huh.
then Antarctica. Although I came very close. I've been on ships that sailed around the Cape Horn and Cape Hope, so
Okay.
around the tip of South Africa and then South America there at Chile and Argentina. So we came very close to entering into the zone of the Antarctica, but never got to actually experience that.
Wow. I think you're the most traveled human that I know personally.
I'm sure there's probably more.
Oh, that's incredible. So through all that travel, through all that, how did you get? We're going to take a break from the naval side for a second. I know that you are a big wine connoisseur. How did you get into that? Was that from all the traveling?
Uh, Actually, no, it was actually my dad. Only because my dad he was in the food service industry, and at
Okay.
one point in New York City, owned a restaurant when I was growing up. So I used to go in there on weekends and just be in the restaurant. But then he got rid of the restaurant, and then he became the food and wine manager at a country club, which happens to be a place that I would caddy at. Anyway, long story short, he was in the food service business, so he had experience with some of the wine, and for whatever reason, at like the dinner table for a Thanksgiving or a Christmas, he would like announce the wine. So I didn't really know anything about it other than it seemed to be an important thing. So in college, I decided to try to learn a little bit. So in college, I
Okay.
tried to follow it up on my dad's sort of, being sort of the role model in that aspect, and having wine around. And then from there, I just started to learn more about it. And then took a, believe it or not, when I was in Crystal City, I was a contracting officer at NAVC. Believe it or not, NAVC and the other syscoms used to be in Crystal City. And in the building that I lived in Crystal City, there was a flyer up on the wall, and it was a professor of essentially wine. And so he had a class. I signed up, started learning from that. And then when I lived in California, I started traveling. So it's just been sort of a constant, you know, growth in terms of education. And that's
Okay.
where the interest started. And then it's just now sort of blossomed into, I would say it's a way to explore the world, explore the geography, the soil, the wines, why grapes are different in different places and how that happens. So it's become, what I would call just it's a way of, as a hobby that where you're learning about the world as well.
That's incredible. That's a very unique way to, especially as you say, the soil, the grapes, the kind of travel the world, whether it's physically or through your wine. And
Hmm.
when you have a when someone says that you have a passion for wine, are we talking like a couple bottles in the fridge in the basement? Or are we talking? Do you have a wine cellar?
I can call it a wine, sort of a wine cellar. I have a large standing cabinet that's refrigerated that keeps it at the right temperature, the right
Okay.
humidity, and that's where I keep, better bottles of wine because I also like to see how wine is a living thing, and so it changes over time. So, for example, uh, I keep wines up to maybe sometimes 20 years old. So last year I opened up a bottle that was in fact 21 years old from Spain. So it's interesting to see how it changes over time. So it's sort of, again, part of my own education. So I sort of partly collect for the purposes of then seeing what wine is like young and then being able to age it. And you need to just age it sort of in the right environment, cooler temperatures, dark, some humidity kind of thing.
We're going a little off track, but that's okay. Can all wine be aged, or is it like
No,
specific?
you should not age all wines. Mostly red wines, and I would say mostly old world, or if when I say old world, like French, Italian wines can
Okay.
age very well. Spanish wines can age like a Rioja, but then also wines like big Napa Cabs. There's certain elements of a wine called tannin and acid that actually help preserve the wine if stored right. But the majority of wines that you just buy at the supermarket should really be drunk within, a couple years, some even the first year or two.
Okay. Good to know. Well, anyone listening out there, if you didn't know you're gonna get a little wine history or wine education, I know I have. I don't even drink at all, and every time you've brought something in, just smelling it, they all like I didn't know anything about it, so I've learned just by association. So it's
Yeah,
very
I've been
cool.
trying to teach my daughters to, like, they're like, "Hey, this tastes like grapes." That, so I've been trying to, at least recently, I've had them try some wine that's different, and they actually are like, "Hey, this actually tastes like something," and they were able to start to pick it up. But they're in their 20s, so it's not like they've been doing this too long.
Sure, for sure. So let's kind of go back into the Navy world. Not Captain Futcher, I was gonna say. So probably Ensign, Lieutenant Futcher back then. What was it like serving on your first ship?
It was it was different. It was a little bit of a crazier environment. I would say the environment of Navy culture has changed for the better. Uh, you know, and I don't want to. It just was different. In
Sure.
terms of things like parties and going out, and like when you'd go on deployment, things were just a little bit more. I don't know, not as I would say disciplined. And today, and the difference between, let's say, 30 years ago and today is we look at every sailor, Marine, soldier as sort of a unit of readiness. And so it's, today we emphasize things like physical fitness and taking care of yourself. Now Navy culture back then was you didn't need sleep. In fact, it was like a badge of honor in the Navy to not sleep or to prove how little sleep you could get away with. That's
Wow.
clearly not the case today. And the studies show you need proper sleep to function at the best and perform, at the right level. So, I would say it's the culture piece has really changed. From a ship perspective, the other piece, like the first ship that I served on, there were no women except for when we deployed, and
Mhm.
we had a helicopter squadron deploy with us, and there were two female pilots as a part of a CH-46 squadron. So the change going from my first ship, to my last has been, now you probably have a third of the crew upwards sometimes female
Mhm.
performing, all variety of roles. So I would say that overall, the culture is in a better place for the Navy in terms of how we perform. In addition, the expectations of every sailor is a lot more than maybe what it was, and I think that's a part of, in a good way, empowering every sailor, every Marine to do their part, to be innovative, be a part of the culture, etc.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so I don't know if you're aware of this, but a few months ago, NavalX, as people may know, I manage a lot of the NavalX social media accounts and such. But NavalX actually got a comment, we'll say, from someone. Are you aware of this? Do you know where I'm going?
No, I
So
don't.
so we got a comment from someone saying, "Hey, it was actually it was your episode. It was
Really?
the second episode where you talked
Okay.
about how you came to Naval X, is so the podcast was brand new, what Naval X was, and we got a comment about how can we have this innovative organization, led by someone who's not innovative because you've been in for 30 years and you're ruined by the Navy and all the bad things. And my response was simple. And this is kind of where I want to start going on this chat here is personally, both personally and I put this out publicly as Naval X, is think that it's extremely valuable because you get people like me, rogue cowboy that's just gonna go many directions, bureaucracy hacker of sorts. And so, but to do that, for us to be innovative effectively and not just piss people off,
Hmm.
having your experience, having you around has been very valuable because it's that, oh, hey, when we're talking to them, don't just go barreling in because this is all they know. They're
Hmm.
not trying to be rude. They just don't know another way. And
And I'd add two things. So yes, at 30 years, I'm probably married because I grew up in a system that promoted me to captain. But I realized that I'm not the one who is coming up with all of these creative ideas and trying to bring innovation, in a way to both the workforce and to the Navy. My job is to help provide, I would say the right kind of a culture that is open and free, and you know people trust each other to be able to have arguments about what to do. So I don't feel like I'm the one that needs to be like this really super creative guy and the innovative guy, but provide the right kind of environment, and then at the same time also ensure that I'm protecting it from what I would call these outside antibodies. I mean, there's folks that don't necessarily see Naval X as either A, something they need, or B, it is sort of counterculture to the Navy. So how can I either protect that? And then at the same time, walking into a room in some places across the Department of the Navy, both on the Navy side and the Marine Corps side, walking in with that uniform, just for some, it would be challenging for them to hear from, let's say, some of the more creative, innovative, and younger parts of the team. And
yeah,
so if I can just open that door, provide that introduction, and ensure that they feel comfortable with what they might be hearing from Naval X, and provide that sort of open door pathway and a translation of what it is we're doing. That's the value I'm trying to provide, is to provide the team with space, provide the team with the right environment for that culture to build, and then help to open doors, brief leadership on what we're doing. And that's really, that's been my goal through this, as opposed to and to be honest, this has been not the easiest thing. Like I am not always comfortable with how we're doing things. And I often tell folks that I've had to learn to be more comfortable being uncomfortable. A small, flat, agile team, a lot of folks on the team going direct to leadership. We're trying to do that to move fast. It is very much not how I was sort of raised up in this hierarchical rank driven culture. And so it's been a positive for me, to embrace that kind of a change, and especially as a point where I am in my career where I feel like I can help provide, given my rank, the layer of protection, so that you guys can do the things you really need to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I want to pull on that a little bit. You talk about um, kind of protecting and giving that space to innovate and giving the freedom for the team to do what they need to do. Um, and you talked about having your rank be able to get you in the right doors, that kind of thing. But in our environments, you said something that made you uncomfortable is not using rank and not sometimes going the hierarchical route.
Hmm.
And from your perspective now as a leader, getting out, how do you find it valuable in the way that NavalX kind of has that check rank at the door so that we can do things a little bit differently? Or what's your experience been with that?
Yeah, because ranks and like the uniform are what I would call artifacts of authority. Like, for example, you walk into a doctor's office and they go through everything, they sit you down, they say the
Mhm.
doctor will be in 5 minutes, right? You come in, there's an automatic kind of relationship. Like the doctor is an expert, he's wearing his sort of lab coat. You feel like you're the patient. You know what I mean? Like there's a relationship that automatically develops and a form of communication. The same thing when you interact with a police officer. Like for me, it's sort of like
Mhm.
you see that, it's not like I have been stopped for speeding before. But it's like, you say, yes, officer, what, you go through it. There's those kinds of things, uniforms and ranks can inhibit communication, open communication, because they establish instantly a relationship between the two individuals where someone might be like inferior or superior, you know what I mean, in terms of that. Whereas on this team, by having no ranks, no uniforms, a flat, agile sort of a team, we want everyone to have the exact same opportunity. Like your ideas matter, your input to shaping the idea and being able to communicate. And I often say, just because I might say something, I only try to help sometimes get something started, but my idea might often be the dumbest, right? And I have to just accept that everybody else is probably going to have a much better idea of how they want to carry something out. So hopefully I'm answering the question, but by
Yeah.
removing the rank and the uniform, you're freeing up the ability of a team to communicate as equals.
Okay. No, yeah, that's great. I appreciate that insight. And it is very different than the entire military.
Yes, exactly.
And which is the good and the bad, is that we have that side that doesn't understand and they need that artifact to
Hmm.
move forward, to operate. And in some places you do. And when you're on the flight line, you can't have everyone
Absolutely.
leading the show. You need the structure. It's got to go
Yep.
this way and it has to
Yep.
operate that way.
Yep. Yeah. When you're in that kind of a safety, security kind of environment, you have to operate in a certain kind of mode. But this is a different place. The creative, innovative space. Like I don't think Pixar or Google or pick your what is considered creative, innovative companies would be able to work with any kind of DoD military hierarchical structure kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, and this is new. There are folks that do not agree with how we operate, the use of first names, sort of. But again, I joke, like I used to have served multiple tours at the Pentagon, and there's these councils of colonels and captains, and the councils of colonels and captains shouldn't necessarily have be thought of as having all the best ideas, or we need to create a lot more inclusivity and diversity in terms of how we attack problems, and so that's what NavalX is all about.
It's fantastic. Let's rewind just a little bit. So went from kind of beginning of your Navy career to some stuff now at NavalX, but you had a variety of things as a supply officer, multiple ships, multiple countries, all over the world. And then you kind of fell into teaching.
Mhm.
How did that happen?
Yeah, I was before teaching. I was at the Pentagon at what's
Mm.
called OpNav, the Navy CNO staff,
Yeah,
and I had been working on 3D printing and doing some.
that's
Essentially,
right.
when I came into the Pentagon, I was asked by a 3-star, my boss, you know, hey, I need someone to be like an innovation person. I was interviewed and I gave him answers. Somehow I was selected to try to honcho some 3D printing efforts that were sort of nascent and underway across the Navy. So after that, my thought was, you know what, it might be a good point for me to depart the Navy flight line here and go see what I can use these skills as in industry. But during that process, another boss of mine, the chief of the supply corps, sort of asked, "Well, is there anything you would want to do?" And there was this billet list, and I looked at the list, and there was position at to teach at the National Defense University. And I said, "You know what? Never done that before. Maybe I'll go if you want me to stay in. I'm an acquisition professional. I've done several things. I might add value there." And so I took this job at the National Defense University, again, not knowing what I was really getting into. But to be honest, I enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed engaging with the students. It wasn't like, in fact, it was good prep for coming to NavalX, because it's not like I'm the expert. Teaching some more senior, officers and government civilians and folks like that, the learning comes from pulling the experiences that they have out and then being able to translate that into the education that's going on, into the concepts and the theory, because a lot of them don't realize that they were probably doing innovation and acquisition related activities in a lot of their day-to-day jobs. So I think the teaching tour kind of helped prepare me for, in many ways coming to NavalX, because I ended up teaching and leading an emerging technologies industry study. I taught acquisition classes. We had to implement new innovation classes, which I taught. We taught case studies on innovation inside of DoD, because it is quite a bit different than it is, let's say, at a place like Amazon. So it was a great tour. And again, I was planning to leave uh, that job. In fact, I had a retirement package in to leave the Navy, and then I got a call, and somebody said, "Hey, there's this thing, NavalX. Would you want to do
Uh-huh.
that?" And I didn't even know what NavalX was, and so I had to find out more about NavalX. And then again, somehow people convinced me to
Yeah.
stay in the Navy for one last tour, which off the top of my head, I don't even know how many tours in the Navy I've had, but it's definitely been a lot, and a pretty fun journey, one that I did not plan or anticipate when I was 16 or 17 years old, but here I am.
Here you are. And those that are interested, that are listening or watching in some of that, how he got involved with Naval X, that's actually highlighted in our second episode of this podcast. So go back. We talk all about how he got roped into coming out of retirement or um, leaving retirement to come to Naval X. So go check that out for sure. So you've had a lot of lessons learned and a lot of experiences, I'm sure, across your career. Before we talk about some lessons learned, what about do you have maybe a bad experience that you're like, oh, this was not good, and I had to really change some things that you're willing to share, or maybe a hashtag fail or sell that you had or
Sure.
something?
I there's probably many. The best ones is right off the bat on my first ship. I I was the dispersing off. I had multiple roles, but one of them, one big fail. In fact, I think I had two as a dispersing officer, big fails. As a dispersing officer, we had ATMs on the ship, and you had to load the ATMs with cash. There was a whole process that you went
Uh,
through. Well, again, the badge of not getting a whole lot of sleep, I made a mistake, and in ATMs you have these boxes of cash, like fives and tens and 20s, right? And the box knows what it is at the time, back 30 years ago, like by these magnets on the box.
uh,
And so I somehow switched the fives and the 20s.
oh,
So if you had asked for a $20 bill, you'd get a five. But if you asked for a $20 bill, but asked like for it in fives, then 4 20s would come out. So literally, I was this is and I loaded the ATMs at like 11 o'clock at night, which is a mistake. For me, late at night is sleepy time for me.
Uh-huh.
And so suddenly I got a knock on the door. I'm in my stateroom, and it was one of the senior chiefs that worked for me. He's like, "Sir, there's something going on. You got to come now. Something going on." Well, anyway, long story short, there was almost like a run on the ATM machines, like people thinking they're getting free cash, right? But of course, with every ATM machine, there's a computer that tracks everything. Well, anyway, I had my first CO, so that's a mistake. The biggest thing and the most important thing you can do as a dispersing officer is ensure you have 100% accountability. Like, my signature was on file with the U.S. Treasury. Like, I could sign U.S. government, checks and all that kind of stuff. And so I totally screwed up, and I had to come up with a way to solve this problem and get the money back. And this first CO was a screamer. Like, his leadership style was like in your face, his face red, real, like you thought he was going to like beat you up. And look, so the lesson here was this: he comes into the dispersing office the next day, and I don't know what he thought, but essentially the first thing I said is, because there were, I had a team of people that worked for me in the dispersing office, but I said, "Sir, this entire thing is my fault. I messed up. I switched the cash in the ATM machine." And then I said, "Here's my plan to fix it." I explained that the computer tracks everybody that went to the machine. I could see the money they took out. I said, "We'll go," I quickly just explained in a matter of probably less than 2 minutes that, one, the most important thing, it was my fault.
Uh,
There was nobody else's fault here. It was mine. So later on, I mean, he calmed down. He stopped yelling at me. His face drained of the red. And he said, "All right, thank you. Come back in 2 days and brief me on how this plan is going." So then run forward about, I don't know, 6 8 months. There's a change of command. The CO, whatever, leaves. And there's a chaplain, a Navy chaplain. He's from the group. Ships are in these groups. So anyway, I'm talking to the chaplain from the group, and he goes, "You know what?" He was, I guess, like a counselor or like a mentor to the CO of the ship, who was a screamer. Well, the chaplain literally says to me, he's like, the captain liked you. And he did. He backed off of me. We were able to collect the money. There was one individual who refused to admit that he had, you could actually see him purposely and perfectly taking out the exact amount of cash so instead of fives, coming out, 20s were just flipping out of the machine. So long story short, the chaplain literally said, because I immediately honed up that I made a mistake, and then I said, "But I will work my butt off to fix it." And for whatever reason, that meant a lot to the captain, that I didn't try to blame anybody else, and that it was entirely mine. So my one of my first big fails in the Navy was, oh wow, that's meaningful. That I need to highlight my people's success, and where things go wrong, it needs to be my fault. And in this case, it was entirely my fault. But that was an important lesson for me from my first big fail, and one I absolutely don't forget. I can remember every moment of that entire thing leading up to then the chaplain giving me that feedback.
that's incredible. And so is that something that you've adapted to your leadership style over the
Mhm.
years?
Absolutely. So, the most important thing, I've spent my 30 years as an officer. And so I just have teams of people, and really the power of everything that ended up being accomplished was through those teams. From the very first time I was a food service officer, a dispersing officer, all the way up to, having a department of 145 people, on a hospital ship. I mean, I'm trying to set sort of the stage of what we need to be doing. And there's things that I can do to help them,
Uh-huh.
but ultimately, it's about the people. And I'll give you one other just quick short story. There was
Yeah.
I was a department head on the amphibious ship, the Carter Hall, and we're preparing for a deployment. And one of my chiefs, a female chief, uh, she had a medical issue, and so, the question came up, does she need to get surgery? It was sort of an elective surgery, but my thought was, and she had requested, hey, let's get this surgery now before the deployment. That means she'll have to go on convalescent leave, but she will be back, ready for the deployment. But I don't know if you know, Matt, but leading up to a deployment, like the 6 months leading up before you deploy, is like the busiest time of a ship. Inspections, preparing for a deployment. You're just so happy when you get away from the pier. That's how busy it is. Well, anyway, I had an argument with the CO. The CO didn't want it. She said, my CO, and again, the change over time. Now I actually have females working for me, and the CO of the ship, one of the first female captains of a Navy ship, was on the Carter Hall. And I had an argument with her just about like what the best thing to do was, and we had a disagreement. And then finally it came down to, she's like, all right, what do you really want to do? I said, we need to let her go and have surgery. Long story short, she gets the surgery, things go well. She's back before the deployment. And then during that deployment, somebody else gets ill, had to go off on emergency leave, but she was there. And so it worked out really good, really fantastic. And then at the end of that deployment, at the end of my tour, as I was leaving the ship, that chief came up to me and said, sir, can I have a moment with you? She was emotional. Let's put it that way. The fact that I went to bat for her, I allowed her to go get the elective surgery. So, another lesson for me is things like that mean so much to people at a human level. And so, that's, again, lesson after lesson after every tour. It's always been about the team and about the people and connecting at the human level. I can still feel the emotion in me because she was very emotional. And, she even asked, if you go back, this is like now mid 2001, a few months before 9/11, she was like, can I give you a hug? She asked the question because it's obviously non-standard as a chief, but that was the kind of relationship that you end up, building in a war fighting kind of environment, like a naval platform.
Yeah, that's incredible. And that's what it all comes down to. Now I'm in 27 episodes of this podcast, and every single person talks about the people. There is not, I don't know any leader out there that says, oh no, people don't matter. And so you just,
Right.
and if they do say that, then they're not a leader for long.
Right. Like I can tell you as an ops research guy, I made some great spreadsheets, some great models, some great simulations. I remember them, but nobody else cares.
Oh, that's excellent. And just hear you say that is about the time that you put into people and letting them, both protecting them, letting them do what they're there to do, as you talked to earlier. That was my first experience with you, was a year and a half ago now, and starting this new effort of like, hey, we got to start communicating differently and reach out to folks. And I remember we had a plan, or I asked you and you said, yep, you're good to go. I said, how often do you want me to talk to you? Do you want to like micromanage? Do you want me to like tell you daily, weekly, monthly? And I'll never forget, you said, tell me when you need money, tell me if you're about to get in trouble, and tell me if you need help. Besides that, you let me take my vision and all the things that it's turned into now. And so I say thank you to you. It was a great leadership time for me to kind of let me grow this idea, and in some ways failed. Some things I've stopped doing because they weren't working, and other ways that we've kept going. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and the one thing that, like, my biggest takeaway from you, my lesson is that I am an analytical person. Like, I enjoy numbers and spreadsheets and math and all that. But you like to do, like, your method of problem solving is, let's go do, we try, we learn, we iterate, we try again. And so you just keep trying different options. It's a great model. And so that is something that like, as I transition out of the Navy, I'm actually keeping that in mind, because again, I think I'm being too analytical about what I might do next. And in many ways, I think in the end, I have some interest areas. I'm just gonna try something and learn as I go.
And there you go. There you go. If you need a cheerleader, let me know. I'll be like, sir, just do it. Don't wait. Just do it.
Yes, you'll be my like the job life coach.
There you go. So what other lessons have you learned that popped in your head of like just your career, whether it's at NavalX or in general? What things come to mind when you think about closing out a 30-year career?
Oh, that's a hard question because there's so much. I know we've hit on a few, so I'm trying to think of well, there's the other piece of this, which is the other human side. We talk Navy, we're talking NavalX, we're talking deployments. The
Mhm.
other piece is where I am now, at home. I've deployed on
Yeah.
4 ships. I was a geobatch on my last ship for 22 months. A geobatch, for those that don't know, geographic bachelor. So my family stayed in the Virginia Beach area, and I was
Mhm.
deployed in the Western Pacific for 22 months. Got
Wow.
home only 4 times, and so I would not have been able to do all of the things that I have done if it was not for my family, my wife taking care of kids. My second daughter was born a little early. She was in the NICU for a month. I was sleeping at the hospital, on the couch, trying to do my job on a ship, and doing that kind of thing. And so that's the piece that I would say is, don't forget, you have to take time to spend, with your family. You're going to spend a lot of time in the Navy away from your family. And so that the moments that you have with them are just so, important. And even today, my daughters are older, in their 20s, still finding the time, to connect with them. Like I lost my mom back in January, and I have asked my daughters, it's like, hey, we need to talk like every Sunday. I used to talk to my mom and dad every Sunday.
Mm.
And so, trying to build a routine, not just on text, like get on the phone, hear voice or FaceTime or whatever. But if I have one lesson, that would be the other piece, is really ensuring that you're spending quality time, with your family. 30 years, I've been married 28 of those 30 years in the Navy.
Wow.
So that's an important piece for me and a valuable lesson.
Yeah, I think that's magical, and that's really at the end of the day, it's about people and it's about your people, because all the work that we do, wherever anyone is inside the government, it's both a lot of times busy and sometimes thankless and sometimes overwhelming, especially if you're deployed. So I think highlighting that importance of family, taking care of yourself, as
Hmm.
you've done, you know that everyone at NavalX is really bad about not working into the 2 a.m.
Right.
I think you're in there with us as well.
Yes. In fact, my better half, my wife Sharon, it will often say, "Are you going back into that room again?" She'll like, it's drawn to this thing here. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, well, I think that's what a lot of people, especially this last year, faced was it was so easy to
Hmm.
just turn the lap. Oh, I'm just gonna check real quick. So
Right.
so what
Yeah.
about what
So,
ab- go ahead.
no, I was just saying, so we've tried to institute, like you said, during this time, like when we sit at dinner, just how was your day? Like it's sort of like what you used to do when you drive home and you come home, and then it's like your dogs are barking and greeting you,
Uh,
and used to be the little kids. And so having that like time where you can kind of like reconnect and just get away from the virtual screen.
yeah, no, that's important for sure. So let's kind of finish with some about NavalX. You came into this. There's another episode about how you got here, but from when you got here to now, is it's about almost a year and a half, or is it 2 years?
It's probably 20 months, going on 22 months, something like that.
Okay. So what have you learned from coming on in 2019 to now, or what have your experience been like?
One, I'm just amazed. Like yesterday, the update to Mr. Stephanie, the acting Assistant Secretary of the Navy for RDA, the growth of Naval X. I mean, it's just I didn't anticipate our ability to grow as fast and scale and connect with people as fast as we did, even with COVID and all of the other issues. Uh, um, I maybe should have not. I should have anticipated it better, to better scale it, so that folks better understand how to use NavalX. So I think we're at that point where we just need to better get our story out, and find more ways that we can deliver value to the workforce. And we mentioned, like, that's who, you know, are the valuable piece of the Navy are. We talk about the folks in so many ways, and so I think delivering on those the connections we've been building. But for me, the biggest lesson was when we started in this little office with like 12 people, and where we are today, where you are, Matt, in this NavalX space with, again,
Yeah.
the people that are there, energized. There are other folks who want to join the team, who see the value, at least in terms of trying to bring positive, productive change across the Navy. That's the great part. There are people passionate because they want to bring goodness to the Navy and the Marine Corps, and keep what I would say that the nation, the great nation that we have, as is, free and open, kind of a society with the values and the Constitution and all those kinds of things. And so it's just great for me to be able to leave on a high note with such a passionate group of people who I feel like are going to do fantastic things going forward. And so I'm very satisfied with where, I won't say satisfied where the Navy is, but I'm saying we're headed in the right direction. And I think I'm satisfied with the NavalX team and their energy and pursuit to deliver goodness and value to the greater Navy.
That's fantastic. That's incredible. And you say there a lot, but you're part of that. You're a plank owner in Naval X, so we thank you. The team also is going to thank you in many ways, but I'm the host, so I get to thank you now. So as we close, sir, is there anything else you want to share about your experience in the Navy, advice you have for folks coming up or doing things in innovation or in anything at all?
I mean, if there's anything else, especially for the younger folks who might be either, like, for example, just entering the Navy, or even in their early tours of the Navy. I mean, there are going to be challenges. There were many, but to be honest, the challenges were the best part of the Navy. Meaning those were the memorable points. And at the time, it might seem like, gosh, you miss your family, and there's all these other things, but to me, the best part of the experience is the struggle. Like, you feel like you're working through things and problems, and you're solving problems, and
Yeah.
and it's a part of the journey. And if things were just so easy, I feel like I think life would just be boring. We'd be like, if we were all average, and if we were all the same, but that's not it. None of us are really average. We're all so different, and sometimes those human connections are even hard itself, as you know, Matt. Just, we have a lot of difficult discussions in NavalX, but that journey and that challenge of working together through these problems is what I think makes it so valuable. So don't give up. Just because you have a challenge, you're going to get through it. Sometimes you're going to fail, and you're going to remember those failures, but you're going to learn from them. That's the best part. You may not learn from them like me. You think you're learning from them, and maybe sometimes you're going to hurt a little bit, but that's a part of being human.
Well, I bet you've never loaded an ATM wrong again.
I never did. I'm curious now, when I walk up to the ATMs today, if the internal workings are the same. I want to do that. I want to go to like Navy Federal and say, hey, can I just stand here with you? Can I see how you guys work the whole ATM machine and see if it's still the same?
Well, we have that, here at NavalX, part of us being here is working with building momentum and some of the innovative organizations. The Capital One has their innovation
Oh,
cell
that's
just
right.
on and he
Yeah.
was actually cutting open an ATM.
And I've walked by that one, you're right, and it still looks the same, which is maybe a little disappointing.
Well, and recently I did an episode with Captain Matt Arney out in Whidbey Island, and he was saying something similar about refueling aircraft.
Mhm.
When he was flying 25 years ago, 30 years ago, they were refueling the exact same way they're refueling now. So,
Yeah, I remember the comment, having served on two logistics ships, and the refueling, what they call underway replenishment, moving
uh-huh.
fuel from ship A to ship B, is the same. We have better technology in the cranes and the things to control the machinery,
Yeah.
but it's the same system with some minor improvements.
Excellent. Well, sir, thank you for this fantastic conversation. Um, do you know what you're going to do? Are you just going to go and grab some bottles of wine and head to France, or
I don't
you
know what I'm gonna do yet. No, I honestly don't. I have no offers, although I haven't really pursued it. I wanted to focus on NavalX, and just given that I work inside of the RDA community, who hands out a lot of contracts, I wanted to also be very careful. So
yeah,
I will start that in earnest here come April, and I will probably have a good bottle or two of wine and play some golf to just sort of wind down.
yeah. Please take some breaks. You've earned it for sure. Take some time off. So, well, thank you again, folks. We've been chatting with Captain Frank Futcher, just finishing out a 30-year career inside the Navy, doing all kinds of things. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Frank, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Matt. It was great. I appreciate
All
it.
all right, everyone, have a great day, and don't forget to subscribe to stay tuned with our future podcasts. Have a great one. See ya.